In the crucible of World War II's final brutal spring of 1945,
an extraordinary chapter of human history began in an unlikely place, Camp Rucker, Alabama.
While global conflict still raged, deeply ingrained wartime animosities were challenged by a radical, unprecedented directive. Here, German prisoners of war were not merely a select group was about to be entrusted with saving American lives. This is not just a story of wartime survival, but of a profound human paradox, centered on 12 German women whose professional oath would irrevocably blur the lines between enemy and healer, forever reshaping perceptions. Before we reveal how these women, initially seen as adversaries, fundamentally transformed American perceptions and healed hundreds of wounded soldiers, please take a moment. If this story of unexpected alliances and professional dedication resonates with you, hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your engagement fuels our exploration of history's most compelling, often overlooked, narratives. Picture the scene. Spring 1945. Greta Miller, a 28-year-old surgical nurse from Munich, a veteran of operating under relentless bombardments, steps off a transport truck at Camp Rucker. Her once pristine white uniform is now a stark canvas of war, mirroring the collapse of her nation and the grim future she braced for as a prisoner. Yet, what unfolded next defied all conventional protocols for enemy combatants. While thousands of male German POWs were immediately dispatched to arduous manual labor, Greta and her 11 female colleagues were directed to a segregated section, one astonishingly equipped with actual beds, clean linens, and a full complement of vital medical supplies. This wasn't merely dissension, this was an unprecedented reception, a strategic overture, signaling that their captors recognized a value far beyond their prisoner status. In the spring of 1945, a remarkable and unprecedented chapter began deep within Alabama's Camp Rucker. German prisoners of war not only survived their captivity but demonstrably flourished. Yet, these were no ordinary detainees. Among the thousands of captured soldiers were 12 women whose presence would profoundly reshape American perceptions of their adversaries. Far from the cold, calculating Nazi image widely disseminated by wartime rhetoric, these women were highly trained medical professionals, nurses, who had sworn an oath to heal, irrespective of uniform or nationality. The narrative unfolds with Greta Miller, a 28-year-old surgical nurse from Munich, captured during the German military's collapse in Italy. As she disembarked from the transport truck at Camp Rucker, her once pristine white uniform, now soiled and tattered from her arduous journey, silently testified to her capture and the uncertain future that awaited her. She braced herself for the worst. However, she was about to encounter circumstances that would forever alter her own life and profoundly impact the lives of hundreds of wounded American soldiers. While Greta and her 11 fellow nurses were processed under the relentless Alabama sun, a stark contrast emerged. Unlike the male POWs, who were immediately assigned manual labor, these women were directed to a segregated section of the camp, furnished with actual beds, clean linens, and essential medical supplies. This exceptional arrangement had been specifically requested by the camp's medical officer, Captain James Morrison. "Ladies," Morrison addressed Greta, the senior nurse among the group. In his deliberate, accented German, "We know who you are. We understand your training. We will treat you with the respect your profession deserves." Greta's eyes widened in disbelief. In 3 years of war, no one had spoken to her with such courtesy. The other nurses exchanged incredulous glances. Anava, barely 22 and recently arrived from Berlin's renowned Karite hospital, whispered in German, "Is this some kind of trick?" Morrison continued, gesturing towards the camp's makeshift hospital visible through the fence. "We have casualties. American soldiers needing care. Our medical staff is critically overstretched. We are not demanding your labor. We are offering you an opportunity, a chance to do what you were trained to do." The proposition hung in the air, potent, with unspoken implications. These women had spent months evading Allied forces, witnessing the disintegration of their nation, and enduring horrors that would forever haunt their dreams. Now they were presented with a path towards healing, rather than continued concealment. Greta remained silent for a long moment, her mind a tempest of memories and present realities. Back in Munich, her hospital had been bombed 3 times. She had operated by candlelight, performed amputations without anesthesia, and watched young soldiers succumb due to a desperate scarcity of supplies. Here, she saw abundance, actual surgical equipment, sterile bandages, and an array of pharmaceuticals she hadn't encountered in months. Finally, with a careful choice of words in her cautious English, she addressed Captain Morrison. "If you treat us with dignity, we will show you what German nurses are capable of." Their first day in the American hospital, Ward felt like stepping into an alternate universe. Greta observed Nurse Patricia Coleman skillfully changing the dressing on a young soldier's shattered leg. The American nurse's hands moved with practiced precision, yet Greta could discern the subtle tremor of fatigue in her eyes, a telltale sign of too many sleepless nights. "We're on 2 shifts," Patricia explained to Greta, "and more casualties are arriving daily from the Pacific Theater. We're doing our best." She gestured helplessly at the crowded ward. Greta nodded, understanding the unspoken language of medical professionals pushed to their limits. She approached the bed of 19-year-old Californian soldier Tommy Chun, whose wound, infected for days, had not been properly cleaned. Without being asked, she began to examine it with gentle, professional hands. "What is she doing?" Tommy asked nervously, recognizing her German accent. "Helping you get better, son," Captain Morrison replied, watching from across the room. Greta's expert assessment quickly revealed complications that had been overlooked by the overtaxed American staff. Within hours, all 12 German nurses had seamlessly integrated into the hospital's demanding routine. Helga Kleen, an infectious disease specialist, immediately identified 3 cases of pneumonia that had been misdiagnosed as battle fatigue. It was Greta who initiated a profound impact as she worked alongside Patricia Coleman, teaching her a German technique to minimize surgical scarring. She began to grasp something extraordinary. These American nurses were not her enemies. They were her professional sisters, bound by the same calling to heal, the same unwavering commitment to preserving life. Anna Weber's specialized expertise in trauma surgery proved invaluable in the operating theater. "Why are you helping us?" Patricia asked during a brief lull, her tone imbued with genuine curiosity. Greta paused, her hands still glistening from the surgical scrub. "Because a wounded soldier transcends nationality. He is simply a human being who needs to be whole again." By the 3rd week, something truly remarkable was unfolding at Camp Rucker. Word of the German angels revolutionizing patient care at the camp spread throughout the American medical community. Dr. Eleanor Richardson, a prominent surgeon from Birmingham, arrived unannounced to witness the phenomenon for herself. What she observed shattered all preconceived notions of enemy combatants. In the operating room, Helga Kleen was demonstrating a revolutionary approach to preventing post-operative infections, blending German medical knowledge with available American resources. Yet, it was in the rehabilitation ward that Dr. Richardson witnessed something that would resonate throughout her distinguished career. Greta Miller sat at the bedside of Sergeant Mike O'Brien, a bomber pilot whose right arm had been so severely damaged that amputation seemed inevitable. Utilizing rehabilitative methodologies developed in German military hospitals, Greta slowly and patiently worked to restore function to muscles that American doctors had declared dormant. "The neurological pathways remain intact," Greta explained, her now fluent and articulate English, to Dr. Richardson. "In my country, we learned to salvage limbs because we could afford to lose no more soldiers. But here, with your superior resources and equipment, we can achieve even more." Sergeant O'Brien looked up, tears welling in his eyes. "Doctor, 3 weeks ago, they told me I'd never use this arm again. Yesterday, I picked up my coffee cup, for the first time since my plane went down." Dr. Richardson watched Greta meticulously adjust O'Brien's exercises, like a master artisan. This was more than just medical care. It was the art of healing applied with profound dedication. In Ward C, she saw Anna Weber instructing American medics on advanced suturing techniques, which reduced healing times by an astonishing 40%. The German nurses' approach seamlessly combined clinical excellence with an almost maternal tenderness, transforming the sterile hospital environment into a sanctuary of hope. "Miss Miller," Dr. Richard murmured, "I have practiced medicine for 20 years, and have never seen rehabilitative techniques like yours. Where did you learn them?" Greta's expression took on a distant, somber quality. "Out of necessity, Doctor, when you see enough young men lose hope along with their limbs, you learn to fight for every muscle, every nerve, every chance at a normal life. War taught us to cherish what is left, not to mourn what is lost. The transformation culminated in the 4th week when an unforeseen crisis tested the very foundations of trust the German nurses had painstakingly built. A train carrying severely wounded soldiers from the Pacific Theater arrived 3 days early, bringing 47 casualties, and overwhelming Camp Rucker's medical facilities. Captain Morrison found himself facing an impossible situation. Critically short-staffed and under... That night, as chaos threatened to engulf the hospital, Greta presented Morrison with a proposition that would have been unthinkable just months prior. Standing in his office, flanked by Anna and Helga, she spoke with calm yet resolute conviction. "Captain, we wish to work the night shift, all 12 of us, and without guards. We give you our word as medical professionals." Morrison stared at her. The weight of an unprecedented decision pressed upon him to allow enemy prisoners of war unsupervised access to wounded American soldiers defied every regulation he had learned. Yet, he had witnessed their dedication, their unparalleled skill, their genuine commitment to healing. "Miss Miller, if I agree, then something goes awry." "Nothing will go awry," Greta gently interrupted. "You have treated us with honor, and we will repay that honor with our finest work." That night, as the German nurses moved quietly and efficiently through the wards, something extraordinary transpired. Exhausted American medical personnel, after weeks of relentless patient care, watched in astonishment as their former enemies toiled in the darkness with a devotion that surpassed their own. Private Bobby Martinez, delirious with fever from an infected wound, clutched Greta's hand as he administered medication. "Are you an angel?" he mumbled in his delirium. Greta smiled, adjusting his blanket with maternal care. "No, soldier. I am merely a nurse, remembering why I chose this profession." By dawn, all 47 new patients were stabilized. 3 soldiers who had been near death sat up, requesting breakfast. The ward's infection rate had dropped to 0 for the first time since the hospital's opening. Captain Morrison found Greta in the pre-dawn quiet, meticulously completing her rounds, just as she had begun them 12 hours earlier. "Miss Miller," he murmured, "I believe it's time we discussed what happens after this war." The pivotal conversation that would alter everything unfolded in Captain Morrison's office, as the first rays of dawn painted the Alabama sky. Greta sat opposite him, her uniform now bearing the temporary insignia of a medical officer and unprecedented recognition for a prisoner of war. The gravity of the moment settled over her like a palpable force. "Miss Miller, I have been in contact with the War Department," Morrison began, his voice imbued with an unusual solemnity. "What has transpired here at Camp Rucker is being studied at the highest levels of military command. What you and your nurses have accomplished defies everything we thought we knew about our enemies." Greta remained silent, sensing the immense significance of what was to come. Through the window, she could see the hospital wards, American soldiers beginning to stir. Many of them had been saved by German hands once considered instruments of destruction. The war in Europe is over. Germany has surrendered unconditionally. Theoretically, you are slated for repatriation within a few months. Morrison paused, observing her reaction carefully. "But I have a proposition, one that could fundamentally reshape the lives of your nurses, the landscape of American military medicine, and indeed, the very concept of international reconciliation." He slid a document across the desk, the official seal of the United States War Department gleaming in the morning light. "The Army Medical Corps wishes to offer all 12 of you temporary positions as civilian contract employees. You would continue to work here, training our medical personnel with your techniques, helping us prepare for future conflicts. With full pay, appropriate housing, and a pathway to permanent residency in the United States." The offer hung between them, a bridge spanning an impossible chasm. Greta thought of her bombed-out hospital in Munich, the crater where her apartment building once stood, a nation facing decades of arduous rebuilding from the ashes of defeat. Then she thought of Sergeant O'Brien, who could now write letters with his once useless right arm, of the 47 soldiers they had just saved hours ago, of Patricia Coleman, who had become more sister than former enemy. "Captain Morrison," she said slowly, her voice almost a whisper. 3 months ago, I was your enemy. I wore the uniform of a nation that brought darkness to the world. Today, you offer me a future I never dared to imagine, but I cannot speak for the others. This decision must be made by each woman individually, with full understanding that it means abandoning everything they once knew. Morrison nodded, comprehending the complexity of her stance. Take all the time you need, but, Snooties, what you have accomplished here has changed minds in the Pentagon. General Bradley himself has reviewed your medical innovations. Your rehabilitative techniques are being implemented in veterans' hospitals across the nation. That afternoon, Greta gathered her 11 colleagues in their barracks. As she explained Morrison's proposal, the small room was charged with an electric tension. Hannah Weber, the youngest, spoke first. Greta, what do we have to return to? My hospital in Berlin is Rubel. My family. Her voice faded into a pained silence, heavy with the weight of loss. Helga Klein, ever the pragmatist, raised the obvious concern. But we would be seen as betraying our homeland, collaborating with the enemy. Are we collaborators? Greta gently countered. When we saved Private Martinez's life last night, when Anna stopped Sergeant Thompson from losing his leg to gangrene, when we choose healing over hatred, silence descended upon the room, each woman grappling with questions that had no easy answers. Only the truth they had found within themselves, in this unlikely place of redemption. The deliberation meeting lasted through the night, each woman grappling with profound personal and geopolitical dilemmas. By morning, something remarkable had emerged from their collective soul. 10 of the 12 nurses chose to accept Morrison's offer, while 2, yearning for family they hoped might still be alive, opted for repatriation to an uncertain Germany. Helga Klein's decision was made after a private conversation with Dr. Eleanor Richardson, who had returned specifically to witness the nurse's choice. In Germany, Helga confided, my innovations were dismissed because I was a woman. Here, Captain Morrison listened to my suggestions on infection control. Yesterday, he implemented my sterilization protocols hospital-wide. For the first time in my career, I feel my knowledge truly matters. Anna Weber, unexpectedly, became the most fervent advocate for staying. My parents perished in the Berlin bombings, she declared, her young face set with a determination beyond her 22 years. But here I have found something. I thought forever lost the ability to save lives instead of watching them slip away. In Germany, I was just another victim of the war. Here, I can be a healer again. The emotional weight of their decision became clear during their final week as prisoners of war. American soldiers, initially filled with suspicion, now lined up to shake their hands, offering thanks for care that extended far beyond medical necessity. Sergeant O'Brien, his arm saved from amputation by Greta, presented her with a wooden crucifix he had carved himself during his rehabilitation. Miss Miller, he said, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. I don't understand how enemies became angels, but I know my children will have a father who can hold them, and it's all because of your hands in that moment. Everything coalesced, embodying the profound truth the German nurses had discovered. The power of choosing compassion over conflict. Patricia Coleman organized a farewell ceremony that would have been unthinkable mere months prior. American and German medical personnel stood side by side as Morrison officially appointed the 10 nurses to their new civilian roles. But it was Greta's speech that encapsulated the transformation they had all undergone. We arrived here as prisoners of war, she said, her English now fluent and confident, defined by the uniforms we wore and the flags we served. We found that beneath those symbols, we were simply human beings called to heal. In saving your wounded, we saved ourselves. In choosing kindness over hatred, we discovered that when enemies serve something greater than politics or nationalism, they can become family. The ceremony concluded in a truly unprecedented moment in military history. The German nurses swore an oath of allegiance to the U.S. Army Medical Corps, vowing to uphold the same principles of healing and hope that had guided their extraordinary transition from captive to caregiver. As Greta signed her contract, she thought of the young woman who had stepped off the transport truck months earlier, broken boudoir, expecting only punishment. That woman had been transformed under the Alabama sun, replaced by one who understood that even in humanity's darkest chapters, redemption was possible. Thus, 6 months later, the German angels of Camp Rucker had become legendary figures within the American military medical establishment. Their techniques were being taught at Walter Reed Hospital. Their rehabilitative methods contributed to a remarkable 60% reduction in amputation rates. Their approaches to trauma care were revolutionizing treatment protocols from California to New York. Greta found herself at the epicenter of a medical revolution she never intended to start. Her morning rounds now included not just patient care, but also training sessions with American nurses who traveled from across the nation to learn German medical techniques. The irony was not lost on her. Methods developed in Nazi military hospitals were now being employed to heal American veterans. This transformation extended far beyond mere medical procedures. The nurses became unintentional ambassadors of reconciliation, living proof that healing could transcend hatred. Their story was studied not only by military doctors but also by sociologists and psychologists seeking to understand how enemies could become allies through the simple act of choosing compassion. The ripple effect of their success spread to unexpected places. Helga Kleen married Corporal David Martinez, the brother of a soldier she had saved from sepsis months earlier. The wedding, celebrated at the Camp Rucker chapel, blended American and German traditions, testament to reconciliation unthinkable in the war's darkest days. Anna Weber blossomed into a brilliant surgical instructor, her youthful enthusiasm infectious. Her demonstrated techniques, saving limbs and lives in veterans' hospitals across America. Her personal story, of losing everything in Berlin yet finding purpose in Alabama, became a symbol of hope for other German refugees striving to rebuild their lives in a foreign land. The War Department began implementing similar programs at other POW camps, seeking German medical professionals who could contribute to American healthcare while finding their own path to redemption. The Rucker model became official policy, altering how the United States treated skilled prisoners of war. Yet, for Greta, the most meaningful moments still occurred at individual bedsides. Every morning, she visited the veterans ward, where former enemies had become grateful patients. Corporal Chun, whose infected wound had been her first case, was now, inspired by her example, studying to become a medic himself, dedicated to healing without regard for nationality or politics. "Nurse Miller," he said during one visit, "my little sister asked me how a German nurse could be an American hero. What should I tell her?" Greta smiled, adjusting his physical therapy equipment with the same gentle precision she had shown on her very first day. Tell her that heroes are not made by the flags they serve, but by their decision to heal instead of harm, to build instead of destroy, to love instead of hate. Anyone can make that choice, no matter where they come from, and no matter what uniform they once wore. As 1946 dawned, the 10 German nurses were granted permanent residency status. Their transition from prisoners of war to citizens represented one of the most extraordinary shifts in American immigration history. Their success paved the way for hundreds of other German professionals hoping to rebuild their lives in the United States while contributing to the prosperity of their new homeland. Greta's personal journey reached a milestone when she received her American nursing license, officially becoming the first professionally certified former enemy prisoner of war in the United States. The ceremony, attended by military officials and medical professionals from across the Southeast, marked not only her individual achievement, but also the triumph of an unprecedented human experiment in redemption. The Camp Rucker medical facility had transformed into a teaching hospital, with Greta serving as the director of rehabilitation services. Her department had become a pilgrimage site for medical professionals worldwide, all seeking to understand how the integration of German techniques with American resources could achieve previously deemed impossible therapeutic outcomes. Anna Weber was accepted into Emory University School of Medicine, her tuition funded by a scholarship specifically established for former German medical personnel who demonstrated exemplary service to American patients. Her acceptance letter made no mention of her enemy background, instead highlighting her extraordinary dedication to healing and her innovative contributions to U.S. military medicine. The philosophical implications of their journey were profound. Dr. Eleanor Richardson, now a close friend and colleague of Greta, often reflected on how the German nurses had challenged fundamental assumptions about nationality, loyalty, and the very nature of service. In her scholarly papers, which influenced decades of medical education, she wrote that healthcare was a universal language that transcended political boundaries. But perhaps the most powerful testament to their transformation came from an unexpected source. General Omar Bradley, visiting Camp Rucker to personally observe the rehabilitation program, sought a private meeting with Greta. as they walked through the hospital wards now under her direction. He uttered words that would define her American legacy. "Miss Miller," Bradley murmured, "when this war began, we fought an ideology that claimed some people were inherently superior to others. You and your nurses have proven the opposite truth, that greatness comes not from accidental birth or nationality, but from consciously choosing to serve something greater than oneself. You are more American than many Americans I know." Greta paused at the bedside of a young veteran who was learning to walk again with a prosthetic leg, his life saved by techniques she had developed in the war-torn ruins of Germany. "General Bradley," she replied, "America gave me the opportunity to be the nurse I was meant to be, free from the hatred and fear that once defined my world. This nation taught me that healing has no borders, compassion has no enemies, and redemption is possible for anyone willing to serve others before themselves." As night fell over Camp Rucker, Greta meticulously completed her rounds, just as she had on that uncertain first day months earlier. But now, she moved through these halls no longer as a prisoner of war seeking redemption, but as an American medical pioneer, her story poised to inspire generations of medical professionals to look beyond uniforms and flags, to see the universal human need for healing, hope, and a second chance. The legacy of the German Angels continued to expand in 1947 and beyond. Their influence reshaped American military medicine and challenged societal assumptions about former enemies. Greta's rehabilitation techniques were codified into official Army Medical Corps doctrine, saving thousands of limbs that would otherwise have been lost to amputation. Her methodologies were taught in medical schools across the country, transforming how America treated not just war wounds, but also civilian injuries. This success story received its ultimate validation with President Harry Truman's personal visit to Camp Rucker to observe these revolutionary medical programs. As he toured the facility, accompanied by Greta and her team, Truman paused at the bedside of Colonel James Patterson, a decorated bomber pilot who had been paralyzed from the waist down by a spinal injury until Greta's intervention partially restored his mobility. "Mr. President," Patterson said, struggling to sit upright to demonstrate his recovered strength, "6 months ago, doctors told me I'd never walk again. This German nurse refused to accept that diagnosis. She worked with me every day, pushing me to limits I thought impossible. Now, next month, I'll be walking my daughter down the aisle at her wedding." Truman turned to Greta, tears welling in his eyes. "Miss Miller, when I authorized this program, critics told me I was too naive about our former enemies. They said German prisoners could never truly become loyal Americans. Today, I see the answer to those critics. You have proven that America's greatest strength lies not in defeating our enemies, but in transforming them into friends through the power of opportunity and respect." The president's visit culminated in an unprecedented ceremony, where Truman awarded Greta and her nurses the Medal of Freedom, America's highest civilian honor. As she stood before an assembled crowd of military officials, medical professionals, and grateful patients, Greta reflected on her journey, one that had taken her from a bombed-out hospital in Munich to the highest echelons of American recognition. "Mr. President," she stated in her acceptance speech, "when I first arrived at Camp Rucker, I anticipated punishment for my nation's crimes. Instead, I found Americans who looked past the uniform I wore and saw the healer I could become. You offered me the chance to save lives instead of mourn them, to build hope instead of succumbing to despair. In return, I offer you my absolute commitment to the values that make America great, the belief that anyone, no matter their past, can contribute to a better future if given the chance to serve." The story of the German Angels became a cornerstone of post-war reconciliation efforts, demonstrating that former enemies, if treated with dignity and given opportunities for meaningful contribution, could become productive citizens. Their success influenced American policies towards German refugees, Japanese Americans returning from internment camps, and ultimately shaped how the United States would approach reconstruction efforts in occupied territories. Years later, as Greta trained her American successors and watched Anna Weber graduate from Emory Medical School as Dr. Weber, she often returned to the simple truths that had guided their transformation. Healing knows no nationality. Compassion knows no borders, and the choice between hatred and hope is open to every individual, regardless of their past mistakes or present circumstances. These German nurses, who arrived as prisoners of war, had become pioneers of American medical innovation. They stood as living proof of a nation's capacity for forgiveness, and as testament that even in humanity's darkest hours, choosing to heal instead of harm can turn enemies into family, strangers into citizens, and despair into enduring hope.